The night smelled like roasted coffee beans, rain, and electricity from the neon lights outside. Inside Café Namu, the world felt smaller, just the soft hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, and the faint sound of water dripping from a tap that never quite stopped. Amora Ellis wiped down the counter for the second time. She wasn't really cleaning anymore, it was just something to do so she wouldn't fall asleep. Her knees ached. The shift had been long, and Mrs. Kim, the owner, had left an hour ago, leaving Amora to close up alone. She glanced outside through the glass door. Seoul at midnight glowed like a restless heartbeat. Cars moved silently on the distant main road, their headlights gliding like ghosts. The cafe sat on a quiet side street near the Han River, not dangerous, but not exactly safe either. Amora adjusted her cardigan and rubbed her arms. The early autumn air had a chill that slipped in every time the door opened. She checked the time, 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes until she could lock up and catch the last subway home. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mom. "Mum, don't forget to lock both doors. Stay safe, my love." Amora smiled, typing back quickly. "Amora, I will. Just finishing up." Her mother was a British diplomat, polished, careful, always in control. Amora was the opposite, quiet, observant, but full of unspoken thoughts she only put into her sketchbook. The sketchbook was waiting in her backpack. She'd been working on a drawing of the river, all reflections and movement. But no matter how hard she tried, it didn't feel alive. Everything in this city was too perfect, too polished. She missed the chaos of London, the noise, the colors, the way people actually looked at her without pretending not to. Here, in Seoul, she was invisible until she wasn't. People stared at her skin, her curls, her accent, always polite, always curious, but never familiar. Amora sighed, grabbed the trash bag, and headed toward the back door. Outside, the air was colder. The alley smelled of rain and metal. She tossed the bag into the large bin with a heavy thud and stretched her arms. That's when she heard it, a sharp shout that sliced through the night. A man's voice. Angry. Korean words, fast and harsh. She froze, her hand still on the bin lid. Her first thought, drunk people, maybe arguing. But then came another sound, the crash of breaking glass. Not the thin crack of a bottle, something heavier, like a window or a car mirror. Her heart jumped. She ducked instinctively, lowering herself behind the tall green recycling bins. They smelled faintly of beer and bleach, but they were solid enough to hide behind. From there, she could see the mouth of the alley, lit by a pair of headlights. A sleek black sedan was parked diagonally, blocking the exit. 3 men stood in front of it, all in matching grey suits. One of them was on the ground, holding his wrist, his face twisted in pain. Another stood rigid, eyes lowered. And the third, the one standing apart, was different. He was tall, maybe 18 or 19, with dark hair slicked neatly back and a face that didn't belong in this dirty alley. His expression was calm. Too calm. His right hand glinted, metal catching the light. Brass knuckles. The man on the ground tried to speak, but the tall one cut him off with a low voice, soft, controlled, in Korean. Amora caught only a few words, but the tone said everything. A warning. A command. The one on the ground nodded frantically. There was silence, heavy and thick. Amora's hands trembled against the cold concrete. She should go. She should not be here. But she couldn't move. Her artist's mind, that terrible, curious part of her, couldn't look away. The scene was like a painting in motion. Shadows, headlights, power, fear. Then, suddenly, the tall man's head turned. His eyes, dark, sharp, assessing, met hers. Amora stopped breathing. For a long second, no one moved. The night shrank to the space between them. He didn't shout or signal his men. He just looked at her with annoyance, not surprise. As if she were a mosquito that had landed somewhere inconvenient. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then, slowly, he tilted his head, the smallest movement, like a nod downward. It took her a second to realize what he meant. Leave. She didn't wait for him to change his mind. Amora scrambled backward, slipping on the damp pavement, heart hammering. She pushed the cafe door open and slammed it behind her, locking it twice with shaking hands. Inside, everything was too quiet. She leaned against the counter, chest heaving, staring at her reflection in the glass door. Her own wide, terrified eyes stared back. A few seconds later, she heard it, car doors closing, then the low roar of an engine. The headlights outside shifted, then disappeared. Only the hum of the fridge remained. Amora sank to the floor. She pressed her hands over her face. Her mind replayed the image over and over, the calm voice, the blood on his knuckles, the look that said you're a problem. Don't think about it, she whispered to herself. You didn't see anything. You don't even know what you saw. She finished locking up on autopilot. Her hands still trembled when she turned off the lights and stepped into the street. The city felt different now, sharper, darker, watching. As she walked toward the subway, she kept glancing over her shoulder. Nothing. No one. Just the quiet hum of Seoul. But the image stayed with her all night, the man in the grey suit, standing in the light like something carved from stone. And those eyes, cold, controlled, and impossibly steady. Morning sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, too bright for the 2 hours of sleep Amora had managed. Her mother's voice floated from the kitchen. You look half alive, Mrs. Ellis said, not unkindly. Rough night. Amora blinked away the memory of the alley. Just coffee. Too much of it. Her mother slid a cup of tea across the counter. Don't make me regret letting you work late. Seoul might look safe, but you never know. Amora forced a smile. I'll be careful. But as she walked to school, her eyes kept darting to every black car she passed. Each one looked too similar. Too clean. Too silent. By the time she reached Seoul International High, she'd convinced herself she was overreacting. It was just an ugly accident, some rich guys playing gangsters. That was all. The building towered over her, all glass and order. Students filed through the gates in pressed uniforms and polished shoes. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine. Amora pulled her cardigan tighter. The only brown-skinned girl in the crowd, she always felt like a misplaced brushstroke on a perfect canvas. Her best friend, Minji, waved from the gate. Amora, you okay? You look pale. I didn't sleep, Amora said. Studying again? Amora hesitated. Something like that. They walked inside together, shoes clicking against marble floors. Posters for debate teams and cultural events lined the halls. Everything smelled like paper, detergent, and ambition. By the time she reached her homeroom, her nerves had mostly calmed. She slid into her seat near the back, unpacked her notebook, and tried to focus. Students chatted quietly around her until the door opened. Then, silence. Not the usual hush when a teacher walks in. This was heavier, as if the air itself held its breath. Amora looked up. A boy stood in the doorway. No, not a boy. Not really. It was him. Her stomach dropped so fast she almost forgot to breathe. He was wearing the school uniform, navy blazer, crisp white shirt, black tie, but on him, it looked like a disguise. His hair was perfectly styled, his face calm, unreadable. And those same eyes, cold, focused, scanned the room. The teacher cleared his throat nervously. Class, this is Park Ren. He'll be joining us starting today. Please welcome him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ren's gaze drifted slowly across the rows of students until it landed on Amora. Recognition flickered. Barely visible, but unmistakable. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just knew. Amora's pen slipped from her hand, clattering on the desk. Ren turned away first, walking calmly to the empty seat by the window. Every movement was measured, almost rehearsed. The teacher stumbled through the rest of the class. Amora couldn't focus. Her chest felt tight, her thoughts spinning. Why was he here? How? Of all schools in Seoul, of all classrooms, why hers? When the bell finally rang, the other students rushed out. Amora gathered her books slowly, hoping to disappear in the crowd. But before she could stand, a shadow fell across her desk. She looked up. Ren Park was standing right in front of her. Up close, he looked even more composed, not a single wrinkle in his blazer, not a trace of last night's violence. His voice, when he spoke, was low and clear. And in English. Amora Ellis, he said. London transfer student. Lives near the embassy. Works at Café Namu. Her blood turned cold. How do you? I make it my business to know what could destroy me, he interrupted softly. His tone wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact, like he was explaining the weather. You didn't see anything that night, he said. You weren't there. You remember nothing but the cold. He said it like an order, not a request. Amora swallowed hard. And if I do remember? Ren's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. More like an expression of faint disappointment. Then you'll learn something important, he said quietly. Seoul is smaller than you think. And the shadows are deeper than you imagine. He didn't wait for her reply. He just turned and walked away, leaving her frozen. Minji appeared seconds later, oblivious. Whoa, what was that? He talked to you? Amora forced a shaky laugh. Yeah. Lucky me. But her hands were trembling. She stared down at her desk and saw it. A single flower petal. White. Perfect. It must have fallen from his sleeve when he leaned forward. A camellia. She'd seen them in flower shops, symbols of longing, or sometimes, waiting. But this one didn't feel romantic. It felt like a warning. That night, back at her apartment, Amora couldn't focus on her homework. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in that alley, calm amid chaos, looking at her like she was something to be solved. And now, he was sitting 3 rows ahead of her. Watching. Waiting. She opened her sketchbook and picked up her pencil. Her hand moved almost on its own, dark lines forming the outline of a jaw, the curve of a collar, the shadow under his eyes. When she looked down, she realized she hadn't drawn Ren Park the student. She'd drawn Ren Park the heir, the boy from the alley, standing in the light of his car's headlights, judgment in his gaze. Amora slammed the book shut. She could still feel his voice in her ear. You didn't see anything. But she had. And she wasn't sure she could ever forget. The next morning, the city looked the same, yet everything felt different. To everyone else, Seoul was clean pavements, glowing billboards, and orderly traffic. To Amora, it had become a city of reflections, too many mirrors, too many places where someone could be watching. On the subway, people stared at their phones, faces lit blue by screens. She studied their reflections in the window instead of their eyes. Every few seconds she checked the glass doors, half expecting to see Ren Park's calm face among the crowd. Of course, he wasn't there. Still, the thought made her heart race. At school, the rhythm of the day tried to carry her along. First period, literature. Second, calculus. Lunch, noodles that tasted of nothing. Life went on, indifferent to what she'd seen. Only Ren broke that rhythm. He didn't speak to her again, but his quiet presence seemed to bend the air in whatever room he entered. Teachers became overly polite, students whispered, then stopped as soon as he looked up. Even the noisy cafeteria fell silent when he passed through. Amora told herself not to look, but her eyes disobeyed. Sometimes she caught him glancing toward her, expression unreadable, as if taking note of the way she moved, what she drew, who she spoke to. It wasn't threatening exactly, just unsettling, like being a line in one of her own sketches that had come to life. That evening she stayed behind in the art room, claiming she had to finish a project. The school was nearly empty. Outside, the sky was washed in pink and silver light, the city below humming like a distant ocean. She opened her sketchbook. At first she tried to draw something ordinary, a bridge, the way light hit the water, but her pencil refused. Instead she drew patterns of shadow, thin dark lines that spread like roots. In the center she drew a single pair of eyes. When she finished, she whispered to herself, "Stop it, Amora. His not a story. His a warning." A soft knock made her jump. It was Minji, carrying 2 cans of soda. "You're still here? You'll miss the train. I just needed quiet." Minji sat beside her. "Is it that new guy? Everyone's talking about him. My brother says his family owns half of Gangnam." Amora's pencil froze. "Really?" "Yeah. Old money, super private. But get this, his dad's company has a security division. Like, bodyguards, not businessmen. Creepy, right?" Amora forced a small laugh. Probably just rumors. Minji shrugged. Well, rumor or not, he's kind of scary. You be careful, okay? I always am. They left together, but Amora's thoughts stayed tangled. If Ren's family really had that kind of power, then what she'd seen in the alley wasn't just a random street fight, it was business. And she was the mistake that had survived it. When she got home, her mother was on a call, discussing embassy schedules in careful, clipped tones. Amora slipped past quietly. She wanted to tell her everything, yet the words caught in her throat. What could she even say? I saw a boy hurt someone, and now he's in my class. No proof. No evidence. Just a memory that felt like smoke, impossible to hold, impossible to forget. She stood by the window that night, watching lights ripple across the Han River. Somewhere out there, Ren Park was living another version of the same evening, maybe looking at the same water. She wondered if he ever felt small the way she did now. By Monday, rumors about Ren had evolved into legend. Some said he'd studied abroad in Switzerland, others that he'd been expelled from every school he'd attended. Amora ignored the gossip, though her curiosity scratched quietly at the back of her mind. During history class, Mr. Kim called her name to answer a question. She stumbled through half a sentence before realizing Ren was watching her again, not coldly this time, but with faint amusement, like he wanted to see how she would react. She finished her answer and looked away. Her pulse refused to slow down. After class, she packed her books quickly. When she opened her locker, a small folded paper fell out. She frowned and picked it up. No name. Just 2 neat lines of handwriting in Korean, the characters slanted and careful. You saw too much. Stay quiet. Her throat went dry. The handwriting wasn't Ren's, his strokes were more formal, deliberate. This was rushed, impatient. But someone knew. Someone besides him. Minji called from down the hall, Amora, you coming to lunch? Amora forced the note into her pocket. In a minute. She waited until the hall was empty, then unfolded it again, tracing each line. Was it a threat? A warning? Or both? That afternoon she decided to test something. When Ren passed her in the corridor, she spoke first. Someone left a message in my locker, she said softly. It said I should stay quiet. He stopped walking. For a second, the hallway felt suspended in time. Then he turned his head slightly. Did you show anyone? No. Good. His tone carried neither warmth nor surprise, only efficiency. He started walking again, but she stepped forward. So it wasn't you? He looked back. If it were me, Miss Ellis, you wouldn't need a note to understand. Before she could reply, he was gone, moving through the crowd like water through stone. The rest of the day blurred. By evening, she'd convinced herself to throw the note away. But as she dropped it into the trash, she noticed a black car parked across the street from her building. Dark windows. Engine off. She stood there a full minute before it drove away. That night she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment sounded like footsteps. At 3 a.m. she gave up, switched on her lamp, and pulled out her sketchbook. She drew the alley again, the car lights, the cracked pavement, and the shadowed figure that had become both nightmare and fascination. Halfway through shading the page, she stopped. There was a new sound outside, soft, rhythmic tapping. Her heart jumped. She crossed to the window. Nothing. Just wind shaking the branches. But on the windowsill lay a single white camellia. No note. No explanation. Just the flower, perfectly still in the moonlight. She didn't know whether it meant protection or possession, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. She placed it between the pages of her sketchbook and whispered, I don't understand what you want from me, Ren Park. The next day. Rain slicked the school courtyard, turning the tiles mirror-bright. Amora moved through the hall with her umbrella dripping, trying to keep her head down. As she passed the notice board, she heard fragments of conversation. Did you hear? Someone vandalized Ren Park's locker last night. They say it was a rival gang. But the security cameras stopped working. Her steps faltered. Security cameras never just stopped. In class, Ren's seat was empty. The teacher began the lesson as if nothing were missing, but everyone's eyes flicked toward the door, waiting. Halfway through the hour, it opened. Ren entered quietly, Rain still clinging to his sleeves. He nodded once to the teacher and sat down. Amora caught a glimpse of a faint mark on his neck, a thin red line that disappeared beneath his collar. He noticed her stare. For the first time, his expression softened, not with kindness, but with something almost human. Fatigue, maybe. Or the faintest trace of regret. When the bell rang, she followed him into the corridor before she could talk herself out of it. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her voice came out smaller than she meant. He paused. "You shouldn't ask questions like that." "I'm not trying to." "Curiosity," he said quietly, "is more dangerous than fear. Fear keeps you alive. Curiosity gets you noticed." Then he looked past her toward the window, where rain streaked the glass. "I'll handle the note. You focus on your drawings. How do you even know?" He gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I told you. I make it my business." He left before she could say another word. That evening, Amora met Minji at a small bubble tea shop near the station. For the first time in days, she laughed. They talked about school projects, music, small things that felt safe. But halfway through their conversation, Minji's phone buzzed. Her smile faded as she read the screen. "My brother says there was another fight downtown. The police think it's connected to the same group as last week." Amora's hand tightened around her cup. "Did anyone get hurt?" "I don't know. He just said it's bad." Amora forced herself to sound casual. "Maybe they'll catch whoever's doing it." Minji sighed. "People like that don't get caught. They just get richer." Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was coming closer. When Amora reached her building that night, the elevator doors opened to reveal Ren Park standing inside. She froze. He pressed the door open button, waiting. "You live here?" It wasn't a question. Amora hesitated, then stepped in. The small space felt even smaller beside him. Rainwater dripped from his coat, he smelled faintly of clean soap and metal. She managed. "You followed me?" "Not tonight." The elevator hummed upward. She stared at the numbers above the door. "You shouldn't be here." "I could say the same to you," he replied. "You keep walking into the same storm." When the elevator reached her floor, he looked down at her. "You don't need to be afraid," he said, voice low. "Just don't be careless." The doors opened. Before she could step out, he added, almost as an afterthought. "For what it's worth. I didn't want you to see that night. But once someone sees, they can't unsee." Then he was gone, disappearing into the closing doors. Amora stood in the hallway long after the elevator had descended, heart pounding. She realized that despite his warning, she wasn't afraid in the same way anymore. She was something else, caught between fear and fascination, light and shadow. When she entered her apartment, her mother called from the kitchen, "Amora? You're late again." "Sorry, the train was slow." Her voice sounded normal, steady, as though she weren't hiding an entire double life beneath it. Later, lying in bed, she opened her sketchbook one more time. The pressed camellia lay between the pages, fragile and white. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Amora whispered, "Whatever this is, it's not over, is it?" And somewhere in the storm-dark city, a car engine started, answering her question without words. The next morning, sunlight cut through the fog over the river, turning the water silver. Amora watched it from the bus window, half awake, clutching her sketchbook on her lap. She hadn't seen Ren since the elevator incident. Part of her hoped she wouldn't. Another part, quieter but stubborn, wondered if he'd appear again, like he always did. When she reached school, the gates buzzed with whispers. Something had happened overnight. A teacher stood near the entrance talking urgently into a phone. Students huddled in tight circles. Someone broke into the science lab, Minji said as soon as she spotted Amora. No one knows who. But the police came this morning. Amora's stomach dropped. Was anything taken? Just some files. And a camera from the security office. Minji lowered her voice. People say it's connected to that transfer student again. Ren? Minji nodded. Somebody saw a black car outside the gates at midnight. The same model he always rides in. Amora wanted to argue, but a small, uneasy part of her believed it. If Ren was involved, it wasn't random, it was deliberate. He moved through life like every action was part of a bigger plan no one else could see. Classes felt longer than usual. She couldn't focus. The rain had started again, pattering softly against the windows. Halfway through literature, the door opened and Ren walked in late. The teacher didn't even scold him, just nodded stiffly. He sat in his usual seat, 3 rows ahead of Amora. His uniform was neat, but his eyes looked shadowed, tired. When the bell rang, Amora packed slowly, pretending not to notice him leaving early. But as she closed her notebook, she found something slipped between its pages. A folded scrap of black paper, no name. Her breath caught as she opened it. Inside was a single phrase, written in English this time. "You're not safe here after dusk." That night she tried to ignore it. She studied. She watched the rain trace long paths down her window. But when she turned off the lamp, sleep refused to come. By 10, her mother was asleep. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the heater. Amora sat on her bed, staring at the paper again. "You're not safe here after dusk." Was it another threat or a warning? She finally decided to do something she hadn't dared before. She texted Ren. "Amora, was that you?" "Ren, you should delete this number." "Amora, then it was you." "Ren, go to sleep, Amora." She stared at the screen, unsure whether to be angry or afraid. Her phone buzzed again a minute later. "Ren, I mean it. Don't open your window tonight." Amora's heart hammered. She got up, crossed the room, and checked the window locks anyway. The street below was nearly empty, just wet pavement shining under the streetlights. Then she saw it, parked across the road, half hidden under the branches of a tree, a black sedan. Her breath caught. The same kind she'd seen before. She dropped the curtain, stepped back, and sat on the edge of the bed. She told herself it didn't mean anything. Seoul was full of black cars. But deep down she knew better. She didn't sleep until dawn. When morning came, she told herself she'd imagined the whole thing. At school, she waited until lunch before approaching him. He was standing under the covered walkway, alone, phone in hand, rain dripping from the edge of the roof. "Why do you keep doing this?" she demanded. Ren didn't look up. "Doing what?" "Following me. Sending messages. Leaving flowers on my windowsill." Finally, he looked at her. "You're the one who keeps looking back." "That's not an answer." He slipped his phone into his pocket. "You want honesty? Fine. You're involved now. Whether you like it or not." "Involved in what?" Ren's jaw tightened. "Something you can't walk away from. Try me." He studied her for a long moment. "You think the world is fair. That truth fixes things. But the truth gets people buried. So if you want to stay alive, stop asking questions." He turned to go, but she caught his sleeve. "You can't just tell me I'm in danger and expect me to forget it." He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. His voice softened, almost gentle. "I didn't choose you to see that night. I chose to let you live. Don't make me regret it." Then he walked away, leaving her heart thudding in confusion. The following week began quietly. Too quietly. No notes, no messages, no glimpses of black cars waiting outside her building. For the first time in weeks, Amora felt almost normal again. She poured her energy into art. Her sketchbook filled with cityscapes, bridges, reflections, streetlights in rain. But even there, Ren kept slipping in between the lines, the shape of his eyes hidden in windows, the curve of his jaw in the shadows of buildings. By Thursday afternoon, she was helping the art teacher sort canvases when a student rushed in. "There's a delivery for you, Amora." She frowned. "For me." The student handed her a slim box wrapped in brown paper. No return name, just a white camellia painted delicately in one corner. The teacher raised an eyebrow. "Someone admires your work, perhaps?" Amora forced a smile. "Maybe." When the teacher turned away, she opened the box. Inside was a single fresh white camellia lying on black tissue paper. Beneath it, a note. "Stay in the light today." Her stomach twisted. The handwriting was the same as before, elegant, sharp. She looked out the classroom window. The sun was already dipping behind the school buildings, throwing long shadows across the courtyard. That evening, Minji begged her to come to a study group downtown. Amora almost said no. But then she remembered the note, "Stay in the light today." Maybe that was what she needed to be around people, noise, life. The cafe was bright and warm. Students crowded the tables, books spread everywhere. For a few hours, she laughed, drank too much coffee, and almost forgot the fear. It wasn't until she stepped outside that she realized how dark it had become. The streetlights flickered, rain had begun again. Minji waved goodbye from her taxi. "Text me when you're home." Amora nodded and started walking toward the bus stop. The street was nearly empty. Water shimmered across the pavement like glass. She was halfway down the block when she heard footsteps behind her. Not fast, slow, steady, matching her pace. She turned. A man in a dark coat was walking maybe 20 steps back. Too far to see clearly, too close to ignore. Her chest tightened. She quickened her pace. The footsteps did too. She stopped suddenly, pretending to check her phone. The man slowed as well, then crossed the street. For a moment she almost believed she was imagining things. But when she turned onto another road, the sound came again, quiet, rhythmic, certain. Her pulse pounded. She broke into a run. Around the corner, a black car waited with its headlights on. She froze. Then the back door opened and a voice called, calm and unmistakable. "Get in, Amora." "Ren." She hesitated only a second before running toward the car. The stranger behind her shouted something, but she didn't look back. The door slammed shut the moment she was inside. The car sped off. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Who was that? Ren didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the road. Someone who doesn't know how to mind his business. Why was he following me? Because of me. His voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the engine's hum. You were seen with me too many times. People assume things. Like what? That you matter. Amora stared at him. Do I? He gave a small, humorless laugh. That's the problem. They drove in silence for a while. The rain streaked the windows, blurring the city lights into ribbons of color. Finally, she said, "You said I was involved. What does that mean?" Ren exhaled slowly. "It means my family has enemies. Some of them think hurting me means hurting anyone near me. That includes you now." Amora pressed her palms against her knees. "So what do I do? You live your life as if you know nothing. You act normal. And if something feels wrong, call this." He handed her a small black phone, the kind without apps or a camera. Only one number was saved. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "You can't just drag me into your world." "I'm not dragging you," he said softly. "I'm trying to keep you out of it." They stopped at a red light. For a moment the car filled with the red glow, painting his face in strange light, half angel, half warning. She asked, "Why me, Ren? Out of everyone who could have seen that night, why spare me?" He didn't look at her. "Because you looked back. I don't understand. You saw everything and still didn't run fast enough. Most people pretend violence isn't real. You didn't. That makes you different." The light turned green. The car moved again. When they reached her building, he stopped but didn't unlock the doors immediately. He turned to her, voice low. "This will pass, Amora. Just stay quiet until it does. And if it doesn't?" He looked at her for a long time before replying. "Then I'll make sure it does." The locks clicked. She opened the door, but before stepping out, she said quietly, "You can't control everything." He smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised how much I can." She shut the door and hurried inside, her heart still racing. From her window, she watched the car pull away into the night. When she finally turned back to her desk, she saw the flower box sitting there where she'd left it that morning. The white camellia was beginning to wilt, its petals soft and curling at the edges. She opened her sketchbook and started to draw not the flower, but the car lights cutting through rain. Lines turned to shapes, shapes turned to meaning. At the center of the page, she drew two figures, one standing in the storm, the other behind glass, watching. And beneath them she wrote one sentence. Some warnings are just another way of saying, I care. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing the city clean, or trying to. For a week nothing happened. No cars outside the building. No notes. No messages. The city went on spinning, pretending that nothing in its streets ever hid danger. Amora tried to believe it. She went to school, drew in her sketchbook, laughed when Minji made jokes. But part of her mind stayed half awake, listening for footsteps that were never there. Ren kept his distance. He nodded politely in class, silent and unreadable. Sometimes she caught him watching her, then he would look away as if nothing had passed between them. One afternoon she found herself walking home along the river. The air smelled of wet stone and exhaust. Seoul was beautiful from here, silver bridges, towers glowing in the haze. She sat on a bench, sketchbook open, letting the city draw itself through her pencil. Not bad, a voice said behind her. She looked up sharply. Ren stood there, hands in his pockets, the late sun turning the edges of his hair gold. You scared me, she said. That's hard to do, he replied lightly, sitting down beside her. You're the only person I know who isn't afraid of me. Maybe I am, she said. Maybe I'm just tired of acting like I am. He studied her sketch. You draw the city like it's alive. It is, she said. It's always moving, always watching. That's true. He nodded toward the skyline. Every window hides a secret. She hesitated. Is that what you hide too? Secrets? He smiled faintly. Everyone hides something. Mine are just more expensive. The wind lifted a few strands of her hair. For a moment, the noise of the highway drowned the silence between them. Then he said quietly, there's going to be trouble soon. You'll hear things about me, about my family. Ignore them. Why warn me at all if you don't want me to care? She asked. He looked down at his hands. Because pretending not to care doesn't stop people from getting hurt. The words lingered long after he stood and walked away. That night, Amora couldn't focus on her homework. She replayed their conversation until her phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a single message. Do not come to school tomorrow. Her first thought was that it was a prank. The second, less comforting, was that it wasn't. She called Minji. Hey, can we study at your place tomorrow? She asked. Sure, Minji said. Why? You sound weird. Just tired, Amora said quickly. The next morning she followed her plan. Instead of the bus to school, she went straight to Minji's small apartment near the market. They spent the day reviewing notes, eating tteokbokki, watching cartoons. It almost felt normal. At noon, Minji's brother came home early, turning on the news. The screen showed flashing police lights outside their school gates. Explosion in parking lot, the reporter said in Korean. No injuries. Authorities investigating. Amora's hands went cold around her cup. She caught the briefest glimpse of a black car being towed away, its license plate blurred on screen, but she recognized the model instantly. Ren's car. He wasn't at school the next day, or the day after that. Rumors grew wild. His father was under investigation, his family had left the country, he'd been arrested. No one knew the truth. On Friday, Amora left class late and found a note tucked under the strap of her backpack. Meet me where the city ends. 7 p.m. She didn't want to go. Every part of her said to ignore it. But when evening came, she found herself taking the subway south, past the bright parts of Seoul to the older district by the docks. The air there was colder, saltier. Warehouse lights flickered in the mist. Ren waited by the fence, wearing a dark hoodie instead of his blazer. He looked different, tired, bruised beneath the eyes, yet somehow calmer. You shouldn't be here, she said. I could say the same to you. He gave a small, crooked smile. But you came. I needed to know if you're okay. I'm alive, he said. That's enough. What happened at the school? He hesitated. A message. Not meant for you. Or maybe it was. Then, softer, thank you for listening to my text. If you'd gone that day. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. For a while they just stood there, the city behind them, the dark river ahead. Finally he said, you once asked why I spared you. The truth is, I didn't want another ghost. What do you mean? Everyone around me ends up being one, he said. You remind me what it's like not to be. The words were quiet but heavy. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. When she left, he didn't follow. But she felt his gaze on her back until she turned the corner. Rain fell the next morning, steady and grey. Amora reached school early, hoping to catch up on the lessons she'd missed. As she entered the building, two men in dark suits stepped out of the principal's office. They looked out of place, too serious, too silent. The principal spotted her and forced a polite smile. Miss Ellis, good morning. May I have a word? She nodded uncertainly and followed him into the office. The two men waited inside, their umbrellas dripping on the mat. This is Officer Kang and Inspector Cho, the principal said. They'd like to ask a few questions. Nothing to worry about. Amora sat down. Her palms were already damp. Inspector Cho spoke first, voice calm but precise. You're friends with Park Ren, correct? Classmates, she said carefully. When did you last see him? I don't remember exactly. Maybe a few days ago. You didn't meet him outside school? She hesitated. No. Why? The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. We believe he might have information about last week's incident. If he contacts you, you must tell us immediately. Amora nodded, though her heartbeat thundered in her ears. When they finally dismissed her, she stepped into the corridor, dizzy. Someone called her name. She turned and froze. Ren stood at the far end of the hallway. He motioned for silence and disappeared through the emergency exit. Without thinking, she followed. Outside, the rain soaked them both in seconds. They ducked under the stairwell. What are you doing here? She whispered. There are police inside. I know, he said. They're not here for truth. They're here for proof. And proof can be changed. You should turn yourself in. He shook his head. They don't want me. They want leverage. They'll use anyone who's near me. That includes you. Then stop dragging me into this. His voice rose for the first time. I'm trying to keep you alive. She flinched at the force of it. He exhaled and lowered his tone. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. What do they think you did? She asked quietly. They think my family started that explosion to send a message to someone else, he said. They're wrong, but being right doesn't matter when people need someone to blame. So what now? I disappear for a while. He looked toward the grey horizon. But before I go, I needed to see you. Why? Because once I'm gone, you'll be questioned again. They'll ask about me. You'll say you don't know anything. That you never saw me today. Amora crossed her arms. You really think I can lie to police? You can if you have to. He pulled something from his pocket, a small silver key. If anything happens, go to the old cafe by the river. The back room. This opens it. She stared at it. What's there? Answers. Maybe protection. He pressed it into her hand. And maybe a way to end this. Before she could ask more, footsteps echoed near the doorway. Ren's eyes flicked toward the sound. Time's up. He stepped back into the rain, hood up, melting into the crowd that gathered near the gate. Within seconds, he was gone. Amora stood there clutching the key, her thoughts spinning. When she finally returned to class, Minji whispered, You missed everything. The police left. They said they were done. Good, Amora murmured, though her pulse still raced. That night she couldn't shake the image of him walking away through the rain. She turned the key over in her fingers again and again. Was it another warning or an invitation? Near midnight, she slipped on her coat and left her apartment quietly. The streets were empty except for the whisper of passing cars. By the time she reached the cafe near the river, the air smelled of damp stone and coffee grounds, exactly as it had the night her life had changed. The windows were dark. The sign out front had faded. She hesitated, then used the key on the back door. The lock turned easily. Inside, dust floated in the weak light from the street lamp. Tables were stacked, chairs overturned. On the counter sat a small envelope with her name written in careful letters. Her hands shook as she opened it. If you're reading this, I'm gone for now. Don't look for me. Trust the quiet. It keeps you safe. Ah. Under the note lay a single camellia, perfectly white. Amora sat down, the quiet pressing in on her. For the first time since meeting him, she didn't feel only fear. She felt something else, something that might have been understanding. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city was still. She closed the envelope, pocketed the flower, and whispered to the empty room. I'll wait, Ren. But not forever. The cafe looked different in daylight. Sunlight slanted through the dusty windows, showing floating motes of light instead of shadows. Amora stood behind the counter with the silver key still warm in her hand. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about it all night. She told her mother she was meeting Minji for a school project. Instead, she'd come straight here. The door creaked when she pushed it open. The air smelled faintly of old beans and rain. Everything was silent, but she felt watched by the stillness itself. She crossed to the back wall. Behind a row of empty shelves, she saw a narrow metal door half hidden under layers of peeling paint. The key slid in perfectly. The lock clicked. Inside was a storage room that looked ordinary at first. Bags of coffee beans, a stack of boxes, an old espresso machine. But one box near the floor wasn't dusty. She pulled it out and opened it. Files. Photographs. Maps. All of them stamped with a red symbol she didn't recognize, a circle with two intersecting lines. Every photo had handwriting on the back, neat and precise. Names, addresses, times. Some of the faces were familiar, men who had come into the cafe before closing, the ones who always sat near the back. She turned over the last photo and froze. It was her, standing behind the cafe counter months ago, wiping a glass, unaware of the camera. Her pulse stuttered. She scanned the handwriting underneath. Foreign national. Possible witness. Observe only. She dropped the picture as if it burned. So they had been watching her even before that night. She wasn't an accident. She was already part of their map. A sound behind her made her spin. A figure stood at the door, tall, grey-suited, the same calmness Ren carried but older, sharper. Miss Ellis, the man said politely. You shouldn't be here. Who are you? She asked, voice trembling. He stepped forward, closing the door behind him. Someone who cleans up after mistakes. Ren was supposed to destroy these files. She backed away. He gave me the key. That explains it. His eyes softened a little. He trusts the wrong people sometimes. What do you want? To make sure this doesn't reach anyone else. He held out his hand. Give me the envelope, and you can forget this room exists. Amora hesitated. What happens if I don't? He sighed, the sound of someone disappointed, not angry. Then I'll have to explain to Ren that you made his life much more complicated. Before she could decide, the door burst open. Ren appeared, drenched in rain, eyes hard. Step away from her, he said. The older man raised an eyebrow. You're late, Ren. I told you she's off limits. She's holding evidence. Off limits doesn't apply. Ren moved between them. It does now. The tension filled the small room like heat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the older man gave a short nod. Your father won't like this. Ren didn't answer. He waited until the man left, footsteps fading down the hall, before turning to Amora. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have come. I had to know, she said. They were watching me even before that night. Why? He rubbed a hand through his wet hair. Because you worked in the wrong place. The cafe was one of our information drops. You were a background detail until you saw something you shouldn't have. So I was just unlucky. At first. His tone softened. Now you're something else. What does that mean? It means that anyone trying to hurt me will look for you first. Which means you have to listen to me when I tell you to stay out of sight. I'm tired of hiding, she said quietly. If I'm part of this already, I deserve to know the truth. Ren hesitated, then handed her one of the photographs, the map with the red symbol. This mark belongs to the people who want my family out of the picture. They're behind the explosion at the school. The man you just met works for my father, not for me. We're not on the same side anymore. So you're running from your own family? He nodded once. And you're the only person who knows enough to be dangerous to both sides. Her breath caught. What are you going to do with me now? Protect you, he said simply. Even if it means disappearing again. She looked down at the photo, then back at him. You can't protect everyone, Ren. I can try. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the windows. He glanced toward the door. Come on. It's not safe here anymore. They slipped out the back entrance just as another car turned into the narrow street. Ren led her through an alley, then into a smaller lane that opened toward the river. The air smelled of rain and oil. Where are we going? She asked. To someone who owes me a favor, he said. You'll be safe there tonight. They walked in silence until they reached an old apartment building with flickering lights. A woman in a floral apron opened the door and nodded at Ren without a word. He spoke softly to her in Korean, and she gestured for Amora to follow. The woman gave her a spare blanket and a cup of tea before leaving them alone in a small room filled with books and the hum of an old heater. Amora sat on the edge of the bed. Does your family know where you are? If they did, I'd already be gone. He leaned against the wall. They think keeping power is the same as keeping control. They don't understand that control always breaks. She studied his face. In the warm light he looked younger, almost normal, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. You could just leave Seoul, she said. Start over somewhere. He shook his head. You can't outrun blood. 2 days later, life pretended to return to normal. Police stopped visiting the school, the news moved on, and students whispered about new rumors, none of them true. Amora hadn't seen Ren since that night in the safe house. He'd disappeared again, as if swallowed by the city. On Friday, her mother announced, "We've been invited to a dinner with the Parks. It's diplomatic, don't be late." Amora nearly dropped her spoon. The Parks? As in? Yes. Chairman Park's foundation is donating to several embassy programs. Try to look presentable. The word chairman made her pulse skip. That was Ren's father. She considered pretending to be sick, but her mother was already selecting a dress for her, soft blue silk that made Amora feel like she was being painted into a picture she didn't belong in. That evening, the car drove them through glittering streets to a mansion high above the river. Lights traced the roof like stars. Guards in black suits stood at the gate. Inside, everything gleamed, marble floors, golden chandeliers, the faint smell of cedar. Guests in formal clothes murmured polite greetings in a mix of Korean and English. Amora followed her mother into the dining hall. At the head of the long table sat a man whose face she recognized from the news, Chairman Park, Ren's father. His expression was calm, almost kind, but his eyes were sharp as glass. "Mrs. Ellis," he said smoothly. "Welcome. And this must be your daughter." Amora bowed slightly. "Thank you for inviting us." He smiled. "My son mentioned your name once. You attend the same school, I believe?" She nodded carefully. "Yes, sir." "Good. I'm pleased to know he has respectable friends." Something in his tone made her uneasy. Was that a compliment or a warning? Throughout dinner, she listened more than she spoke. Her mother discussed cultural programs, while the chairman spoke of business and charity. The surface was calm, but underneath, Amora felt tension like invisible wires stretched too tight. At one point she glanced toward the far corner of the room and froze. Ren stood there in a dark suit, speaking quietly to one of the assistants. Their eyes met across the crowd. His face revealed nothing, but a flicker of recognition passed between them, swift and secret. The conversation at the table faded into a blur. She could only hear the sound of her heartbeat. After the meal, as guests drifted into the garden for dessert, she slipped outside for air. The night smelled of rain and jasmine. She leaned against the balcony railing, trying to steady herself. "You shouldn't wander alone here," said a familiar voice. Ren stepped out of the shadows, the glow from the lanterns outlining his profile. "I didn't think you'd show up," she whispered. "I didn't have a choice. Family events are mandatory. What is this dinner really for?" He glanced back toward the windows. "An agreement. My father is pretending to make peace with people he intends to destroy later. That's how he works." And he invited my mother because she's useful. Diplomats make good shields. Amora folded her arms. You talk like it doesn't bother you. It used to. He looked out at the garden. Now I just try not to become him. For a while they stood silently, the sound of laughter drifting from inside. Then he said, you shouldn't have come tonight. There are people here who would recognize you from those files. I didn't have a choice either, she said. He gave a faint smile. Seems we have that in common. Your father knows about me, doesn't he? Ren's expression hardened. He knows everything. But as long as he thinks you're harmless, you'll be safe. And if he stops thinking that, then you'll leave the city. I'll make sure of it. She looked at him. You can't protect me forever. Maybe not. But I can try long enough to give you time. Voices echoed from the hall, her mother calling her name. Ren stepped back into the shadows. Go, he said quietly. And whatever happens tonight, don't look surprised. When she turned to answer, he was already gone. The next morning, her mother was unusually cheerful. That dinner went well, she said over breakfast. Chairman Park even mentioned he'd like to sponsor a cultural exhibition featuring young artists. Perhaps you should submit some of your work. Amora froze mid-sip. He said that. Yes. He seemed quite interested. Amora nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, her thoughts raced. Ren's father was drawing her closer, not pushing her away. Was it kindness, or strategy? She walked to the window and stared out at the bright morning, remembering Ren's words, don't look surprised. For the first time, she understood what he meant. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. She opened her sketchbook on the table and began a new drawing, 2 silhouettes on a balcony, light and shadow overlapping. At the edge of the page she wrote a single line of text. The closer you stand to the light, the longer your shadow becomes. Seoul was loud that night, louder than usual. Rain had stopped, but the air still smelled wet, full of traffic and distant thunder. From the rooftop of her apartment building, Amora could see the lights of the bridges stretching across the river like lines of fire. She came up here to think. Or maybe to stop thinking. The dinner at the Park's mansion wouldn't leave her head, the politeness that felt like a trap, Ren's warning, his father's smile that never touched his eyes. Her mother had gone to bed early, convinced everything was perfect. To her, Seoul was diplomacy, meetings, handshakes. To Amora, it was something else, a chessboard where people like her were just pieces moved by invisible hands. She pulled her cardigan tighter and sat on the low wall. The wind brushed her face, carrying the city's heartbeat. You shouldn't sit that close to the edge, a voice said behind her. Amora didn't jump. She'd already guessed he might come. Ren stepped out of the shadows, dressed in black again, his hair damp. You always choose the highest place to think. Easier to breathe up here, she said. No secrets, just air. He walked over, leaning on the railing beside her. You're still thinking about last night. I can't stop. Your father talked to my mother like she was part of his plan. He mentioned me, Ren. He said I had potential. What does that even mean? Ren's expression tightened. It means he wants to keep you where he can see you. That's how he controls people, by making them feel useful. I'm not useful to him. You are to me, he said quietly. She turned to look at him. That's not helping. He smiled faintly. Didn't think it would. For a long moment they just stood there, the wind tugging at their clothes. Then she said, you said you didn't want to become him. But how do you stop that? You're his son. Ren looked out over the river. By choosing what kind of heir I'll be. So that's what all this is about, your family, the people chasing you, the explosions. It's about who gets to inherit a kingdom. Not a kingdom, he said. A business built on fear. Then why stay in it? Because if I walk away, worse people take my place. His voice carried quiet exhaustion, like someone who'd had to grow up too soon. Amora studied him. You sound like you've already decided your fate. He met her eyes. Maybe I have. But yours isn't written yet. Don't let my world steal it from you. Too late, she whispered. Lightning flickered far off in the clouds. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Ren stepped closer, his tone soft. Amora, if anything happens to me. Don't, she said quickly. Don't say that. He ignored her. If anything happens, go to the embassy. Tell your mother the truth. She'll know what to do. You're not disappearing again, she said. Not this time. A faint smile touched his mouth. You really think you could stop me? I'd try. For the first time, he laughed a real laugh, short but genuine. You would. They stood side by side until the rain began again, soft and light. When she finally turned, he was already walking toward the stairwell. Ren, she called. He looked back. She wanted to say something, thank you, don't go, stay, but the words tangled in her throat. He gave her a small nod. Get some sleep, Amora. When he was gone, she looked out at the city again. The rooftops glittered with rain, and for the first time she realized how small they both looked beneath it. The next morning, the city woke to chaos. News channels blared headlines. Chairman Park's convoy attacked in Gangnam district. Police investigating possible organized crime involvement. Amora's spoon clattered into her cereal bowl. Her mother lowered her newspaper slowly. Looks like things are getting messy again, she murmured. You'll go straight to school and come straight home. No day tours. Amora nodded silently, heart hammering. She scanned the article for Ren's name but found none. Still, she knew he was part of this, maybe too deeply to ever escape. At school, whispers followed her down the hallway. Everyone knew about the attack, and everyone had theories. She kept her head down until lunch, then went up to the empty roof. The air was cold, heavy with grey clouds. She didn't expect him to be there. But when she pushed open the door, she froze. Ren stood near the fence, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. You're alive, she breathed. He turned, eyes tired but alert. Barely. What happened? My father was the target. He's fine. His enemies aren't. He glanced toward her. But now everyone thinks I'm next. Then leave. Go somewhere they can't find you. It's not that simple. He gave a bitter smile. The more you run, the more people follow. So what will you do? End it before it reaches you. She stepped closer. You don't have to do this alone. I do, he said. Because anyone near me becomes a target. Even talking to you here is a risk. Then why are you doing it? Because I wanted to see you once more before it all changes. The wind tugged at her hair. Changes how? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and handed her a folded piece of paper. If you ever need to disappear, follow what's written here. It's a safe route, people I trust. She took it, trembling. Why are you giving me this? He looked straight at her. Because I don't trust that I'll survive what's coming. Ren. He cut her off gently. Don't say anything. Just promise me one thing. What? If someone asks about me, don't lie for my sake. Tell them what you saw. The truth is the only thing stronger than fear. She wanted to argue, but the bell rang, echoing through the air. When she looked back, he was already walking away. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. On the third evening, Amora sat in the art studio, alone. Everyone else had gone home. Outside, thunder rolled over the rooftops. Inside, her drawings covered the walls, shadows of the city, lines of light and dark, and in every one, without meaning to, she had drawn a figure that looked like Ren. She ran her fingers across the charcoal outlines. You said truth beats fear, she murmured. But what if fear's the only thing keeping us alive? She didn't notice the footsteps until the door creaked. Still working, said Minji's voice. Amora turned, smiling faintly. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd finish this piece. Minji stepped closer, glancing at the sketches. They're amazing. But you've changed your style. Everything's darker. Guess the city rubbed off on me, Amora said. Minji hesitated, then reached into her pocket. There's something you should know. Reporters came by this morning. They're asking about Ren Park. They think someone at school's hiding information. Amora's chest tightened. What did you tell them? Nothing, Minji said quickly. But, she trailed off, biting her lip. But what? I saw them talking to the principal afterward. They had photos, Amora. Of you and Ren. Together. Amora froze. Where did they get those? I don't know. But if they publish them. Her phone buzzed before she could finish. A message. Unknown number. They know. Leave now. Ah. She looked up at Minji. I have to go. Wait, what? Please, Minji. Don't tell anyone I was here. Amora grabbed her bag and ran down the hallway, ignoring the teachers' voices echoing from classrooms. Outside, rain poured in sheets. The sky had turned black. She followed the narrow alley beside the school, heart pounding. Every sound felt amplified, the splash of puddles, the hum of a car engine somewhere close. Then a voice called behind her. Miss Ellis. She spun around. Two men in dark coats were striding toward her, badges glinting faintly under the streetlights. Stop, one shouted. We just want to ask questions. She turned and ran. Her shoes slipped on the wet pavement as she darted through side streets, breath ragged. The storm swallowed the city around her. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to reach the river. A car screeched to a stop at the corner ahead. A door opened. Amora. Ren. She didn't think, she just ran to him and climbed in. The car took off immediately, tires hissing on the wet road. He glanced at her, rain dripping from his hair. They have everything. Someone leaked the files. Who? I don't know. But they know you were in the cafe. That you saw the alley. They even know about the rooftop. Then it's over, she whispered. Not yet. His jaw clenched. I can still fix it. How? By making sure they can't use you against me. The words made her stomach twist. What does that mean? It means I have to disappear for good. Let them think I'm gone. And me. You'll go home. Your mother will move you out of Seoul. You'll forget this. I can't forget you, Ren. He didn't reply. The car sped through a tunnel, lights flashing across their faces like snapshots. When they emerged, he pulled over near the riverbank. The rain had softened to mist. The air smelled of cold water and metal. He turned off the engine. You were betrayed, Amora. Someone inside my family sold the files. They wanted leverage. Using you was part of their plan. Your father. He shook his head. No. My uncle. He's been waiting for a reason to take control. The explosion, the investigation, all of it, he's building a case. Then we tell the police. They won't believe you. You're just a witness with no proof. And me. I'm already guilty in their eyes. He stepped out of the car, standing under the streetlight. Stay here. She got out anyway. What are you going to do? End it before he does. He looked at her, eyes dark with resolve. If anything happens, you go to that cafe again. Wait there until it's safe. Ren, don't go alone. He smiled faintly. You said that last time. Before she could answer, headlights flared from the far end of the street. A black SUV rolled slowly toward them. Ren's expression changed, calm, almost relieved. Looks like they found us first. He stepped forward, motioning for her to stay behind. The car stopped, doors opening, voices shouting in Korean. Amora couldn't hear the words, only the sound of rain and her own heartbeat. Then everything happened at once. A shout, the screech of tires, the slam of a door. Ren turned, eyes meeting hers across the distance. Go, he yelled. She ran down the street, through the rain, until the sound of engines faded behind her. She didn't look back. When she finally reached the empty cafe, she was soaked and shaking. The lights inside flickered weakly. She locked the door and sank to the floor, listening to the distant sirens echoing through the city. Her hands trembled as she opened her sketchbook. She flipped to a blank page and began to draw, not with calm, but with desperate energy. Light, rain, a single figure standing against the dark. When she finished, she stared at the image. The man she had drawn was Ren, half in light, half in shadow. And though she didn't know where he was or if he was alive, she knew this. Their story wasn't finished. Not yet. Outside, the storm quieted. And somewhere, beneath the same sky, another door opened. The next morning the city woke under a pale grey sky. The rain had stopped, but puddles mirrored every tower, making Seoul look upside down. News screens on every corner replayed footage of police lights near the river. The captions moved too fast for Amora to read, but she caught one name, Park. Her chest tightened. They were calling Ren a fugitive. She walked quickly, head down, afraid every face in the crowd could read her thoughts. When she reached the cafe, it looked exactly as she had left it, locked, silent, a ghost of its former self. But inside, the faint smell of coffee and dust still lingered. She sat behind the counter and tried to steady her breathing. All night she had imagined the sound of engines, the glare of headlights, the look on Ren's face when he told her to run. The look of someone ready to disappear. Stop thinking about him, she whispered to herself. He's gone. But the silence didn't answer back. She opened her sketchbook. Every page was filled with him, his profile, his eyes, the shape of his hands. She tore one page out and crumpled it, then froze. On the back of that page, written in the faintest pencil, was a small series of numbers. A phone number. Not hers. She didn't remember writing it. For a long moment she hesitated. Then she borrowed the old landline from behind the counter, dialed the numbers, and held her breath. It rang once. Twice. Then a woman's voice answered in Korean, soft but firm. Who is this? My name is Amora Ellis. Ren Park gave me this number. Silence. Then, carefully, you need to come now. The line went dead. The address she was given led her to an older district near the river, full of narrow alleys and low houses. The smell of sea salt mixed with diesel. She found the door marked with the same red circle she'd seen on the files in the cafe. Before she could knock, the door opened. A woman in her 30s stood there, wearing a long coat and calm expression. You shouldn't have called, she said, glancing around the street. But since you did, come in. The interior was simple, wood floors, faint smell of incense, shelves stacked with books. The woman poured tea without asking. You knew Ren, Amora said. The woman nodded. He came here sometimes. We worked together once. Is he alive? I don't know, the woman said quietly. But if anyone could survive that night, it would be him. He's too stubborn to vanish easily. Who are you? Someone who owes him, she said. He saved my brother years ago. That's why I keep this place. For emergencies like this. Amora looked around the small room. What happens now? You stay hidden. You wait. And if you hear from him, you don't tell anyone. Not even your mother. Amora hesitated. My mother's the only family I have here. The woman's expression softened. Then keep her far from this. When Amora left, dusk had already fallen. She walked home quickly, keeping close to the crowds. But as she turned the corner near her apartment, she saw a shape leaning against the streetlight. Her breath caught. It was Ren. He looked worn, clothes damp, hair messy, a faint bruise near his temple. But he was alive. You shouldn't be here, she said, heart pounding. I had to see you, he replied. You called the number, didn't you? She nodded. He smiled slightly. Good. That means you still trust me. Do you realize what's happening? She demanded. They're calling you a criminal. Let them. The louder they talk, the less they see. You sound like you planned this. Not all of it, he said. But enough to know what comes next. And what's that? Leaving Seoul. She stared at him. You want to run? I want to survive, he said simply. And keep you safe. Before she could answer, a car engine hummed somewhere behind them. Ren glanced over his shoulder. Inside, he said quickly. They slipped into the stairwell as headlights passed the street. The sound faded. He let out a breath. We don't have long. Ren, she whispered, why come back at all? You could have disappeared. He met her eyes. Because I couldn't leave without knowing you were safe. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. For the first time, Amora didn't know if she wanted him to stay or go. They stayed in her apartment only a few minutes. Ren spread out a small city map on the table. Tomorrow morning, he said, you'll go to the embassy with your mother. Stay there until I contact you. Don't leave with anyone else. What about you? I'll deal with my uncle. Once he's out of the picture, everything changes. That sounds like war. It is, he said quietly. She looked at him for a long time. You're not who I thought you were. He gave a faint smile. I'm not who I thought I was either. Then he took the crumpled drawing she had dropped in the cafe from his coat pocket. You keep leaving pieces of yourself behind, he said. Try not to. How did you? I never stopped watching, he said simply, and before she could reply he slipped out the door, leaving the map behind. Amora didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bed staring at the map, tracing the red route Ren had drawn. Every line pointed to the same place, the docks where the city ended and the river met the sea. By dawn she made her decision. She wrote a note for her mother, I'm safe. I have to fix something. And left before the sun rose. The streets were empty, wet from last night's rain. She caught the first bus heading south, watching the skyline slide away behind her. When she reached the docks, the air was thick with fog. Ships loomed like ghosts. And there, near the warehouses, she saw him again, Ren, leaning against a railing, staring at the water. He didn't look surprised to see her. You always find me, he said. You left without saying goodbye, she replied. That was the point. Then why did you leave me the map? He smiled faintly. Because I knew you'd follow it anyway. She stepped closer. What are you doing here? Waiting, he said. My uncle's men will come soon. I'm giving them what they want. And what's that? Me. She shook her head. You can't just hand yourself over. It's the only way to stop them from touching you or my father. You think they'll keep their word? I think they'll underestimate me long enough for me to make them regret it. Amora grabbed his sleeve. Ren, please. You can't fight everyone. He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. His voice softened. I never told you why I was there that first night. The alley behind the cafe. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He took a breath. There was a man who betrayed our family. I was supposed to silence him. But I didn't go there to kill him. I went there to give him a chance to leave Seoul. He refused. That's why things turned violent. And you saw. So you spared him? I tried, Ren said. Just like I tried with you. Why? She asked. Because someone once spared me, he said quietly. Your father. Amora froze. My what? Years ago, before your family moved back to London. He was working with the embassy here. There was a raid. I was just a child caught in the middle. He pulled me out before the building collapsed. My father never forgot that. He sent him money every year after. When I saw your name on the work roster at the cafe, I knew who you were. I was told to watch you, make sure you stayed safe. Amora's throat tightened. All this time you knew. I thought I could keep it simple. Keep you untouched by this life. He gave a faint, sad smile. But then you saw too much. The air between them went still. For a moment she couldn't speak. Finally she said, you could have told me. And you would have believed me, he asked. You would have stayed away. Maybe, she said, though she wasn't sure. A car door slammed somewhere beyond the fog. Ren's posture changed instantly, alert, ready. They're here, he said. You need to go. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are, he said, pressing a folded card into her hand. There's a ferry leaving in 20 minutes. It'll take you across the river. After that, go to the embassy. She shook her head. I'm not running. Amora, he said, voice low but steady. If you stay, I can't fight. I'll be too busy keeping you alive. She met his eyes. And if you die, what do I do then? He smiled faintly. You draw the truth. Voices echoed through the fog now, sharp and distant. Ren turned toward the sound, shoulders straight. He looked back once. Go, he said. Please. Amora stepped back, heart breaking with every movement. She wanted to tell him everything she'd never said, but there wasn't time. She ran. Through the fog, past the warehouses, toward the dock where the ferry waited. When she looked back, she saw only shapes moving in the mist, dark against the pale morning. Then the wind shifted, and the scene vanished. The ferry cut across the grey water, leaving ripples that disappeared almost instantly. Amora sat by the window clutching the folded card. On it was a simple drawing of a camellia and a line written beneath. Sometimes mercy is the only rebellion left. She pressed the card to her chest and closed her eyes. When the ferry reached the other side, she didn't look back. The city rose behind her, quiet and endless, full of light that hid its scars. Somewhere out there, Ren Park was facing his family, his enemies, his fate. And she carried his truth, fragile but alive. For now, that was enough. The city kept moving as if nothing had happened. People still filled the subways, buses still hissed to stops, shop lights still blinked through the drizzle. Only Amora moved slower, half listening for news that never came. Every screen she passed showed the same headline. Gang feud ends in dockside fire. No names. Just smoke, water, and the words investigation ongoing. She stood in front of a television shop, rain dripping from her hood. The images replayed, the harbor shrouded in fog, flashing red lights, charred metal. She wanted to believe that he'd escaped. But the part of her that had learned to hear what wasn't said knew the truth might be worse than silence. At the embassy gate she stopped. Her mother was already waiting, coat soaked, expression tight with worry. "Where have you been?" Her mother's voice trembled. "I woke up and you were gone." "I went to the river," Amora said honestly. "I had to see something for myself." "You could have been caught in all that chaos," her mother snapped, then softened. "Come inside. The staff are saying it's dangerous out there." Inside, warmth pressed against Amora's cold skin. Diplomatic staff moved briskly through the halls, whispering in low voices. Her mother guided her into a small office and closed the door. "Amora, listen carefully." Her tone had shifted to the calm authority she used in meetings. "You're not to leave the compound until this situation resolves. There are people asking questions about your cafe job, your classmates, even that park boy." Amora's breath caught. "Ren?" "Yes. I told them you barely knew him." "It's better that way." She nodded, though her stomach twisted. "Do they think he's responsible?" "They think he's part of something ugly," her mother said. "The kind of thing that swallows everyone near it." Amora stared at the window, raindrops sliding like tiny mirrors. Maybe it already did. For 3 days she stayed inside the embassy. Every night she dreamed of smoke over the river. On the 4th morning, a small parcel arrived for her, no return address, no note. Just her name, handwritten in a careful script she recognized. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a folded page torn from a sketchbook. On the page was a drawing, her own face, looking out a train window, and beneath it, a message. "Truth doesn't burn." Her heart leapt. Ren was alive. Somehow, he'd made it. She hid the flash drive under her pillow until night, then plugged it into the small laptop in her room. A single video file appeared, labeled Echo. Ren's face filled the screen, lit by a flickering lamp. He looked tired, older, but his voice was steady. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone, or I need you to think I am. The people chasing me won't stop until someone ends the game. Inside this file is everything, names, accounts, shipments. Enough to tear the park syndicate apart. But it's encrypted with your drawing style. Only you can finish it. Every sketch you ever made holds part of the key." He smiled faintly. "You once said cities watch people. Make them watch the truth now. And Amora, thank you for seeing me when no one else did." The screen went dark. Amora sat frozen. He'd turned her art into a cipher. Every drawing she'd ever done, the cityscapes, the faces, even the casual doodles, were part of his plan. She whispered, "You really never stopped watching." The next morning she asked for art supplies. Her mother looked puzzled but agreed, thinking it would help her pass the time. Amora spread her sketches across the small desk, overlaying them like puzzle pieces. Slowly, faint lines began to connect, the skyline of Seoul forming an invisible pattern. At the center was the red circle she had once seen on the secret files. Inside that circle, hidden among her pencil strokes, was a set of coordinates. She typed them into her phone. The map showed an abandoned museum near the Han River, closed for renovation since last year. She looked toward the hallway, where her mother was speaking with embassy guards. She had promised not to leave. But promises meant nothing if truth stayed buried. She slipped the flash drive into her pocket and climbed out the side gate. The museum loomed grey against the sky, its glass facade cracked and dusty. She pushed through a side door left half open and stepped inside. Dust stirred in the air. The silence felt heavier than darkness. At the center of the main hall stood an unfinished exhibit, a huge sculpture of interlocking metal rings. Beneath it, an open laptop glowed faintly. A voice echoed behind her. "I was wondering when you'd come." She turned. The woman from the riverside safe house stepped out of the shadows, coat pulled tight. "Where's Ren?" Amora demanded. The woman shook her head. "Still breathing. But not safe to be seen." "Then why send me here?" "To finish what he started." She pointed to the laptop. "That drive you're holding unlocks everything. Once you plug it in, his family's empire crumbles." Amora hesitated. "And what happens to him?" The woman's expression didn't change. "If the truth comes out, he can never return. But it's the only way both of you survive." Amora looked at the flashing cursor on the screen. Her hands trembled. Ren had asked her to finish it. He had trusted her with everything he couldn't fix himself. She slid the drive into the port. The screen filled with cascading code, then a list of names, bank transfers, and documents, proof of crimes reaching every corner of the city. It uploaded automatically to a dozen media servers. The woman exhaled. "It's done." "What now?" Amora asked. "Now," the woman said, "you disappear too." 2 weeks passed. The world changed quietly. News channels spoke of arrests across Seoul, of officials stepping down, of hidden accounts exposed. The park name vanished from company logos overnight. No one said Mafia out loud, but everyone knew. Amora watched it unfold from a small seaside town her mother had chosen for safety. Waves broke against the rocks, gulls wheeled in the sky. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like waiting. She spent her mornings sketching by the window, drawing the ocean instead of buildings. Each line steadied her hands but couldn't silence the question repeating in her mind, "Where is he now?" One evening, a letter arrived without a stamp. Just her name. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. No return address, no signature, just 5 words written in familiar handwriting. "Meet me where it began." Her heart raced. She knew exactly what that meant. The cafe had been rebuilt since the explosion, a new sign, new windows, the smell of fresh paint. She waited until after dark, slipping through the alley behind it. The same alley where she'd first seen him. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Ren. He looked thinner, a faint scar along his jaw, but alive. The sight of him stole her words. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "They could still be watching." "Then why ask me to come?" "Because I needed to see what freedom looked like." He smiled slightly. "Turns out it looks a lot like you." She laughed once, half relieved, half angry. "You vanished again. Everyone thinks you're dead. That's the safest way to be alive. They arrested half your family." "Half is enough," he said quietly. "The rest are running. My father's gone into hiding. Seoul will rebuild itself without us. And you? What will you do?" He looked around the empty alley. "Start over. No name, no heir. Maybe go where no one speaks our language." She stepped closer. "You could start over anywhere." He hesitated. "Would you come?" Her breath caught. "My mother would never." "I'm not asking forever," he said. "Just until the world forgets our names." For a moment the city noise faded, leaving only the wind between them. She thought of all the nights she had spent sketching his shadow into the skyline, and of the promise he'd left her, "Truth doesn't burn." "Where would we go?" she asked finally. He smiled. "Somewhere without headlines." They walked together through the quiet streets toward the river. Lights shimmered on the water, the bridge arches glowed gold. It was the same place where everything had ended and begun. Ren stopped by the railing. "You gave them the truth. You did what I couldn't. You asked me to. You could have refused." "I couldn't," she said. "It was the only way to keep you alive." He looked at her for a long time. "Maybe I should thank you." Don't, she said gently. Just live. They stood there until dawn touched the sky with pale pink light. Then he turned to her. When the sun's up, I have to go, he said. There's a ship leaving for Busan. From there, another country. Maybe another name. And if I never see you again, she asked. He reached into his coat and handed her a small sketchbook, hers, restored and bound. Then you'll still have this. Every page is yours again. She opened it. On the first page he had drawn the city skyline with a single white camellia in the foreground. Underneath he'd written, "Some stories don't end. They change shape." Tears blurred her vision. "You and your riddles." He smiled. "Keeps me mysterious." When the first sunlight hit the water, he stepped back, the light outlining him like a silhouette. "Goodbye, Amora." She wanted to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. She only nodded. He turned and walked toward the pier until the mist swallowed him. Later that morning, Amora sat on the same bench where she had first sketched Seoul months ago. The city was awake again, buses honking, shopkeepers opening doors, children laughing. Life continued, indifferent yet beautiful. She opened the sketchbook and began to draw, each line smooth and sure. Not of Ren this time, but of herself standing by the river, facing the light. When she finished, she closed the book and whispered into the breeze. Some stories change shape. And for the first time since that night in the alley, she smiled. 3 months later, summer returned to Seoul. The air smelled of river heat and street food, of renewal after too much rain. Amora had finished her exams, packed her drawings, and prepared to return to London with her mother. They said the city was safe again. The headlines had shifted from crime to festivals, from darkness to color. But every time she walked near the Han River, she still looked for a shadow standing by the railing. One evening, she went there alone. The sky was the color of old gold, and the water carried the reflections of towers and lanterns. Children played nearby, couples strolled, laughter rose and faded. For a moment, she almost convinced herself to let go of the past. Then she heard it, a faint hum, like the low note of a familiar tune. A street musician was playing an old guitar, seated on the steps by the bridge. His face was turned away, but something in the angle of his shoulders stopped her. When he lifted his head, she froze. Ren. He wore a cap and simple clothes, blending into the crowd. A faint scar traced his jaw. His expression was calm, his eyes brighter than she remembered. She walked closer, unable to breathe. He finished the song and looked up. For a moment, recognition flickered, quick, secret, the kind only they shared. She whispered, "You're supposed to be gone." He smiled slightly. "I was. Turns out exile's overrated. You came back. That's dangerous. So is living without seeing what you fought for." He packed the guitar carefully, still speaking in the quiet tone that always disarmed her. "I only have tonight. Tomorrow I leave again. Where this time? Somewhere no one knows my name. But I needed to see the city awake." "And me?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Especially you." The crowd around them blurred into noise and light. Amora wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but he shook his head gently. "Not here. Walk with me." They followed the river path in silence. The city glowed beside them, bridges like strings of pearls, the water breathing softly against the banks. He told her little about where he'd been, only that the world was wider than either of them had imagined, and smaller in the ways that mattered. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Blowing everything open?" He thought for a long time. "No. Regret doesn't fix anything. But sometimes I wish I'd found another way." "You gave people truth," she said. "That's something." "Truth's only useful if people know what to do with it," he replied. "Most just look away." She studied his face in the half-light. "Then why come back?" "Because you didn't look away." They stopped at the railing overlooking the bridge. Lights shimmered on the water like tiny stars. "After tonight," he said, "you won't see me again for a while. It's safer that way. You always say that. And you always listen," he said gently. She laughed softly, the sound trembling between them. "Maybe I'm done listening." He smiled, small and real. "Then tell me something instead." She looked at him, at the boy who had once been an heir to a shadow empire, who now stood with nothing but a guitar and a quiet kind of peace. She said, "I don't know what we are anymore." He nodded. "Neither do I. But whatever it is, it's the part of me that's still human." The words were simple, but they landed like a promise. The river wind lifted her hair, carrying the smell of summer rain. "Will you ever come back?" she asked. "Maybe when the city forgets me," he said. "Maybe when I stop dreaming about it." He glanced toward the sky, where fireworks from a distant festival painted brief flowers of light. "Do you still draw? Every day? Then draw me how you want me to be remembered," he said. "Not how I was." Before she could answer, he stepped back into the crowd. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed by motion and sound. Amora stood by the river until the fireworks faded and only the faint echo of his tune remained in her mind. The next morning, she and her mother boarded the plane to London. As the city shrank below, Amora opened her sketchbook. On the first page was a half-finished drawing of Seoul at night. She began to add a single small figure walking across the bridge, hands in his pockets, face turned toward the light. When she finished, she smiled. For the first time, the drawing didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like beginning. 1 year later, London smelled of rain too. Amora stood in the middle of a bright white gallery, surrounded by her own work. Her first exhibition had drawn more people than she'd dared hope for: critics, students, families. The collection was called Shadows of the City. Each painting showed Seoul not as buildings or skylines, but as a living thing: alleys breathing smoke, bridges stretching like ribs, light falling like confession. In the center hung one final piece, covered by a cloth. Her mother approached, smiling with pride. "They're waiting for you to unveil it." Amora nodded, gripping the edge of the cloth. Cameras clicked. People hushed. When she pulled it down, gasps filled the room. The painting showed a man sitting by a river at dusk, guitar resting against his leg, eyes turned toward the horizon. The light in the painting seemed alive, half gold, half shadow, and at the corner, barely visible, a single white camellia floated on the water. A voice from the crowd asked, "Is it based on someone real?" Amora smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "Someone who taught me that truth has a heartbeat." Reporters scribbled notes, flashes went off. But she barely saw them. Her eyes lingered on the painting, on the faint outline of the bridge behind the man, and on the skyline that had become part of her bones. After the crowd dispersed, she stood alone by the window. Outside, London rain blurred the lights into soft gold streaks. She heard footsteps behind her. "You never told me how it ends," said a familiar voice. Her breath caught. She turned slowly. Ren stood there, dressed in a plain jacket, hair shorter, face leaner but unmistakably him. He smiled at her stunned silence. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I thought you were one," she whispered. "I almost was. But ghosts don't get invited to art shows." He gestured toward the painting. "You made me look peaceful. That's a first." "You shouldn't be here," she said, heart racing. "If anyone recognizes you." "They won't. New name, new passport. I'm just another tourist admiring art." "How did you find me?" He shrugged lightly. "It's hard not to when your exhibition poster is all over the city." Amora laughed, a soft, disbelieving sound. "You're impossible. And you," he said, "are predictable. I knew you'd paint the river." They stood side by side, looking at the painting. For a while, neither spoke. The noise of the city outside faded to a hum. "Did you ever find peace?" she asked finally. He tilted his head. "Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped running long enough to feel the world move again." "Will you keep running now?" "Not tonight." He glanced at her. "I'm leaving again in the morning. Somewhere quieter. But I wanted to see this, to see what became of your truth." "It became art," she said. He smiled. "That's just truth in disguise." They both laughed quietly. Then he handed her a small folded paper. "For when you forget what silence sounds like." She opened it after he walked away. Inside was a drawing, his, not hers. 2 figures standing on a bridge, light spilling between them. Beneath it, One sentence written in his careful hand. Every story needs someone to remember it. That night, when the gallery closed and the city dimmed, Amora locked the doors and sat by the painting one last time. The air smelled faintly of varnish and rain. She thought of the boy with the quiet eyes who had walked out of shadows and changed the shape of her life. She whispered, "I'll remember." The wind outside pressed against the glass, carrying the faraway sound of music, a single familiar note, low and steady, like a heartbeat. She smiled through her tears. The next morning, London woke to sunlight breaking through clouds. News tickers scrolled past harmless stories. The world had moved on. But somewhere across an ocean, a man with a guitar boarded a train, humming a tune that only one person in another country would ever recognize. He looked out the window, the landscape unfolding like a painting, and said quietly to himself, "Some stories change shape, but they never end." Okay, I know you didn't expect that ending. If you were holding your breath like I was, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and tell me below, do you think Ren and Amora deserved another chapter?